Okay, welcome everybody to the event on accelerating sustainability in fashion, clothing and textiles. It's a workshop, surrounding the book that has been produced that a number of people in the room have been involved in. If you want to know more about the book, there are details out there. You can have a look at the book and there are sort of details online. What we have is presentations today by the editors of the book, myself, Bernice and Sandy, and a number of other presentations by other contributors to the book. What we'll then have is time for plenty of networking, because I guess like me, there are probably a number of people that I've only met virtually and not physically, and it's interesting to sort of meet people eventually. I've just about assigned this to Sandy. One of the other things I do is I run a repair cafe. We've run 90 sessions. We're just about now getting back to where we were pre-COVID in terms of just physical normality of meetings. It's a sort of gut feel I have anyway. So others may be more advanced in that sense. But the event is being live streamed. Again, COVID accelerating the technology. 3 live stream cameras probably wouldn't have been there, perhaps. Without the acceleration of technology related to COVID. So what we'll do after the networking session is we'll have a number of different round tables, and on the different tables you will see different topics, and essentially there'll be a discussion related to that topic, each with a facilitator, and then there will be a report back. So choose wisely your table, perhaps at the networking time when we've got more time. And there'll be one open networking table for people who just want to network and don't want to align themselves to any particular topic discussions. So just again, in terms of the process, Bernice, unfortunately, will have to go at 3 o'clock. So after her presentation, we'll take 3, 4, 5 minutes of questions specifically for Bernice, and then questions for me, Sandy, and the rest of the presenters will take after all of the, presentations. All make sense? Have I missed anything out? Probably I have. So again, welcome to this session, and the 3 of the editors will each now do a sort of 10-minute presentation, and then we'll move into the presentations after the questions for Bernice from the other presenters, or the other contributors. So the book emerged from a conference back in 2021, which a number of people presented at, and then we move forward into the book from there. And what I'm going to do, and I, in a sense, identified this as this area as a topic area, not being a specialist in the field, being involved in lots of other different fields over the years, but I saw so much change happening in this sector. Which I think we all know is real. So I'm going to pick up a couple of key topics. This isn't supposed to be representative of all the key topics, but something that's maybe some food for thought. So, we're sitting in this 5th green consumer wave. This is not the first wave. We've got a lot of activity, coming from different perspectives that is different from the other waves. I think the social element has come more into this wave than previous waves. The fashion, clothing and textiles sector is a huge global sector, 4th largest sector in the world, although in doing the book, trying to find reliable and consistent statistics on sectors' environmental impact is not easy. There's lots of stats out there, which is again part of the challenge the challenge. It's a large, complex global sector, significant manufacturing in Southeast Asia, significant outsourcing, supply chain issues, lot of SMEs, micro SMEs, still a lot of manual labour. Industry 4.0 is on its emerging wave in the sector. Still a lot of sewing machines. Very fragmented, coming into the sector, incredibly fragmented. So many initiatives, new initiative every day. And that's very true also on the environmental side. Which are the solid initiatives? Which are people really signing up to and actually taking action from? Very difficult to see in this picture. So fragmentation. And again, huge complex sector. Environmental impacts across the board are significant, whether it's water use, chemical use, CO2 or waste. Waste is, you know, a significant issue throughout the whole value chain. And we are seeing different initiatives emerging in terms of circularity, but they're quite emergent in places. We are seeing more engagement with particular terms from the sector that aren't in other sectors, like you don't necessarily have pre-loved electronics. So you are seeing, you know, particularly younger people, Gen Z, you know, getting and driving new initiatives, whether it is a consumer or as an entrepreneur. So circularity is coming on the agenda. We do have, and I'll come back to this in a minute, significant policy activity, particularly from Brussels. Not from the UK, but particularly from Brussels in the sector. And this is going to drive a lot of change and create a lot of issues, particularly for micro and SMEs in the sector, who will not be prepared or are unlikely to be prepared. So we also do see interesting key parts of circularity are regional dimensions. If you're really looking at how you utilize post-first life materials and components and products, regional initiatives are important. And we are seeing different types of regional initiatives. So in the Netherlands, we have the Circular Textiles Valley Initiative, which is an early stage investment by the Dutch in a network of pilot projects who are driving different aspects from recycling to biomaterials to design to new business models. And having just visited it and just probably gone past lists on the train, I believe that's 2 or 3 years ahead of the 3 circular fashion networks that have been set up in the UK. So the Netherlands are ahead. You know, UKRI, Research and Innovation, have funded 3 circular fashion networks in the UK and have a plan. This is on their agenda, but as I say, this is still let's say the detail. I know a number of people are involved in this room, but it's you know, it's still emerging. But I think the Dutch have 3 years on us in the UK. But we also have other interesting things from a regional perspective. For example, we have, you know, Harris Tweed. We've got regional IP, if you like. So that's a sort of another quite interesting thing for the sector. We, again, have these multiple series of environmental codes and initiatives. But when you get down into more of the social and the world behind the brands, those codes and initiatives are less well evolved, and how you measure the social and ethical dimensions is much less evolved. Also, a key thing coming out of the book, which I hadn't really recognized, was the importance of indigenous cultures and indigenous knowledge, and how that is often forgotten, but also the particularities of indigenous cultures, often sourcing regionally, using natural dyes and materials, sharing the knowledge over time, designing for longevity. So there's some issues, some lessons that can be learned, you know, by immersing ourselves in other cultures. Again, this is a figure I found difficult to get absolutely concrete statistics, but approximately 60% of fibres are plastics and 40% are natural. So again, there's a lot of plastics in the sector. I mean, I'm being very crude on this, but also there's a lot of mixed materials as well, which is a big challenge as well, particularly if you're designing for separation and dismantlability at end of life. So, right, I see the policy change is one of the most key issues that's going to impact on the sector. There's, within the European Commission, they've now brought in textiles into their work on the eco-design for sustainable products regulations alongside traditional sectors like electronics, but it's come in bang into the sector, wasn't there before. There's the circular textiles strategy. There is more horizontal activity around green claims. And again, the sector is one of the poorest, well, it has one of the highest numbers of cases related to greenwashing. So this is a big issue for the sector. Reliable information and communication. And what we've seen is some people even stepping back from communicating environmental benefits because of the concerns about being caught out. So that's another emerging side of this. There's also an amendment to the Waste Framework Directive, which is bringing in recycling, separated, I forget the specific terminology, but essentially recycling of textiles is going to be a policy agenda item, or, you know, I think something was, made even more concrete on that just the last couple of days. So a lot of stuff coming up. UK, with this present government, it's very, we do not have a clear direction. Let's leave it at that. We have, particularly this sector is a very demand, consumption-driven sector. We've got the power of TikTok, social media, social influencers. So we've got all that issues around fast fashion, et cetera, et cetera. So Bernice will particularly, I won't steal Bernice's thunder on here. This is a very particular challenge for the sector. As I mentioned here, greenwashing, tightening up around claims, happening in Europe and actually in the UK on this as well. Various studies published that have called out companies. More drivers in terms of transparency and traceability. So do you really don't want to have Xinjiang cotton in your supply chain and be caught with that? So as a number of companies have been recently, so how you trace what's in your supply chain is going to be increasingly important or is increasingly important, as well as transparency. We're seeing some companies like Mud Jeans, for example, openly showing on their website the actual workers who are working on their products on their website. So a more inclusive, transparent business model. And people are looking for that. I think what came out of the pandemic actually oddly was, clearly a number of issues, but there was a recognition of the challenges that people in Bangladesh, in the sector around the world were facing, and suddenly, huge rafts of business were cancelled. And a number of organisations are trying to take that on and look at how they can come up with new issues in the supply chain in terms of education. We have the emergence of digital fashion, virtual fashion, and Jade will run a table on this. I won't go into great detail on this, but digital fashion, it doesn't come without challenges. People don't think about the world behind the screen. To actually render and produce these digital fashion garments, it takes a lot of energy. So there is an impact associated with these virtual products. And like quite a number of areas, there are quite a lot of smoke and mirrors in this area. Getting reliable statistics is very difficult. Innovation happening, some number of large companies are now sort of starting to set up more strategic approaches to driving sustainability into their businesses, even incentivizing business divisions to drive more inverted commas, sustainable innovations in terms of their products. But what we also see is a lot of confusion. Confusion by consumers, confusion by students, confusion by SMEs. Which of these 100 carbon footprinting tools is the most reliable and the one I should use? There's a real issue out there about selecting reliable information and reliable guidance and tools. So I think, and again, being outside the sector and coming into the sector over the last 5 years, it is a huge complex sector. There are a huge number of initiatives. I think there's a real need, whether it's in the UK or at a global level, to try and bring those stakeholders together in some sort of platform and develop a plan. The UN initiative on climate change is voluntary, and that's again one of the things, my joke, just my finishing joke on this, was in picking up the chapter on policy. My little joke was I had a bruise on my leg. Why do you have a bruise on your leg? Because I had to keep pinching myself. There was no legislation. It's been pretty well all voluntary in terms of, design, the consumption side of this. The legislation's been more in terms of, factories and things like this. So it's a sector that's operated pretty well as it's wanted to for a long time, but this wave of policy coming from Brussels is really going to require change. And I think that's thinking out to 2030, that is the question. As the policy starts to bite, as knowledge, new courses, new information starts to emerge, where will the sector be? So I'll shut up now. And I'll pass to Bernice, and just a reminder there, because Bernice has to go a little bit early, we'll take a couple of questions after Bernice's presentation.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you all, particularly to the contributors of the book. This, if you may or may not know, is actually the first book that actually strings all attributes, all constituents of sustainability together as a full sector, from policy and standards to supply chain and business models, to innovation and material science, to education and technology, to community circularity, waste, and beyond. It is a huge achievement, all of you who contributed book chapters to help Martin, Sandy, and I put this together. Thank you very much. And why do we need to accelerate sustainability? Because we have a seriously wicked problem in our world, and we're using fashion as an example because fashion leads consumption as the biggest trend in the world. And so with such a complex problem in such a complex world, how do we break down the system to actually try and find solutions to the problem? That's another reason why this is a very special book, because we have solutions, not only identifying problems like a lot of the sustainability forums and discussions out there. Now, we've just finished the COP28 at the end of last year. Another huge rally of discussions on sustainability, but from COP21, Paris Agreement 2015, all the way to COP28, have we really made much advancement? In fact, every single COP is all still staying on the negotiation table. The actual action is still lacking, acceleration is devoid of. And really the discussion is based around energy and finance that propels everything in this world, from food to clothing to technology to building to transport, none of which is being talked about really seriously at any of the COP forums and at any of the global economic forums, at the UN SDG forums. So the elephant in the room is that overconsumption, which is being powered by energy and finance, is constantly
really making us grow. At what cost? At the cost of, in our own sector, all of these stats you will be familiar with, 20% of the global wastewater, global water pollution is actually produced by us in fashion and clothing textile. 25% of the chemical use, 20% of the plastic use, 100 billion garments a year being produced year on year. And then 85% of it goes to landfill straight away, only 1% of it gets recycled. So whether it is renew, re-rent, or whatever refashion, we're slightly kidding ourselves about the fact that we've got solutions here. I started working in fashion in 1996. I started to really look at how to reform and fashion through breaking down the system to re-engineer for new processes around 2000. A lot of people ask me, you've been in this field for a long time. What do you see now as opposed to 20 to 25 years ago? Without thinking about my age, I actually think, wow, it looks like we have made lots of progress because everyone cares now, but actually the problem is now 4 times bigger than it was 20 years ago, and the solutions are not even 4% more effective. So the gap between the problem and the solution through our insatiable demand to accelerate growth has actually got bigger and bigger. Now, so circularity on the tip of everyone's tongue, but really we are actually still running on a circular economy of waste. That means that all of those things that just got put on that stats chart of the accelerator graph turns straight into water pollution for water waste, in the waterways, microplastics in the oceans, ocean acidification being caused through all of these toxic and temperature rising elements being in the sea, causing ecosystem breakdowns where sea life, ocean life is actually being destroyed. Whatever gets incinerated, which is 80% of stuff that gets produced, because 50% of it doesn't even sell, and goes straight into our atmosphere to cause temperature rise, carbon dioxide emission, toxic gas fume discharge, including methane and other types of heavy metal in the particles of air, and fossil fuel dependence, of course, needless to say. And then on land, it causes mass deforestation, soil degeneration, biodiversity loss, and eventually species extinctions in the millions. So, in all honesty, are we really accelerating sustainability? We go on any website of any brands on the high street. I'm sure most of us have 1 or 2 pieces from this brand. I won't mention any name. I went onto their website to look for the new arrivals. The new arrivals, View All has 13,710 SKUs, stock keeping units of different variety outfits. Dresses alone, 1,500. And on the home page, it says good for the planet, good for people. And I wondered how it was going to do that. So I went into the sustainability sort of tab, which is hidden away somewhere in the corner. And then there were 29 sustainable products, of which, when you go into the product description, at the footnotes, it says 15% recycled cotton used in the fabric, which means that if you just do the quick maths, is 0.003% of any sustainability sort of used, deployed in their product range of tens of thousands of units. So how is it good for the people and good for the planet? And if this is not greenwashing, I'm not sure what is. So really, why are we doing that? Why are we kidding ourselves? And why is there such a divergence between our intention? Our intention is not to do bad, but our action is really causing mass depletion and mass damage to world and of people and environment. What's happening in our industry is really that if you look at the past 30 years, since I've been around in this field,
everything has got more expensive, right? Coffee now costs £3 to £4. It used to cost £1 to £2. Burgers cost £15, used to cost £5. Cars now cost 25 grand, used to cost 7 grand or so. Clothing alone has actually dropped in prices. If you got a Gap t-shirt or a Banana Republic t-shirt, when I was a teenager, it cost $20 to $25. Now it costs $5 to $10. And so actually, if you put the year-on-year inflation, average inflation rate, it's actually only a seventh of what it used to cost. Now, how is that even possible when cost of living is rising? We're talking about it in the last few years as an acute impact on us. But really, the annual inflation is going every year, whether we notice it or not. So really, there is actually a value distortion going on in our industry, and that is manipulated to make us think that things should cost less than they really are. And the result of that is that we're not only distorting values, we're starting to really destruct values. And that's what the opening chapter of this book, which I wrote, called The Wicked Problem, is all about. Because those 100 billion garments, if you if you go to the page 41 of the book, it actually gives you a quick stats of if we want growth, and in fact, our sector has enjoyed incredible growth rate of 7 to 9% a year before COVID, and that is even faster than the tech industry on many years. And so with this growth trajectory and 100 billion garments every single year, cumulatively, that means 2050, when UN SDG is supposed to reach its paradigm, we will actually be 9.5 trillion garments in the bin of our planet later. So are we really going to consume until we go bust and combust? This little chart is just to show that on an annual basis, $563 million worth of watch and jewelries get destroyed because they're not sold, $4.3 billion worth of clothing gets destroyed, and so on. So, in our industry, what are the answers? What can we really do to take apart and look at the root cause of the problem and find new solutions? In our industry, such a traditional industry, everything is based on cost of goods sold. Our revenue stream is selling stuff, units of stuff, which is why the growth trajectory is always based on how much more stuff we can sell. And the cost of goods is material plus labor. And every business, by nature, wants to increase revenues and wants to reduce costs, including my own business, Deploy, which I started up 18 years ago. Now, the effect of this fairly universal and reasonable intention in our industry turns out that increasing revenue, i.e. selling more stuff, means, of course, using more material resources from the environment and therefore resource exploitation. And reducing costs means really exploiting people because we want the labor cost to be cheaper and cheaper. So what happens then is that this world, powered by finance and universally accounted in the same way, means that brands own all the assets, society bears all the liability, and the capital reserve is human labor being exploited, and the environmental resources is being depleted. So we're actually on the brink of a system collapse. So really, until we start to unlearn the methodology, the habits of consumerism, sustainability will not actually be accelerated or even implemented seriously. We need to really transition from the 20th century system of consumerism into in my view, the 21st century new paradigm of valuism, which is what I'm really proposing. And regulation absolutely needs to facilitate, but it can't just be directives. It has to be mandatory regulations. And the accounting system has to change, because until we actually look at how profits should be calculated and liability and risk should be calculated, we're never going to, be factoring these externalities into our scope 1, 2, or 3, or into our balance sheets or our futures and projections. And so public and general education is critical in really changing the culture and the mindset, which is why it's so great to be in the presence of so many educators and academics here. And so just a quick couple minutes about Deploy, since that is also in the case study which Sandy kindly wrote about. Deploy is a strategic action plan to reform fashion. And the nub of that is that we're trying to research all these systemic problems and turn them into creative solutions. But we all want newness, we all want variety. So the idea is that how do we use minimal resources to create maximum benefit, which is why most of the clothes that we design, you can wear them in 2, 3, 4 different ways, which means that immediately when you buy one outfit from Deploy, you are decreasing the resource usage and energy usage, water usage, material by 50 to 80% compared to anywhere else, which means that if Zara, H&M, all the big groups start using this method, and if this becomes the universal design education principle for merchandising plan, or a creative direction all the way to merchandising plan, that means that in 1 year, we can actually scale down our problem by 50 to 80%. In 1 season, we can even do that. And that is how we propose to reform fashion for a new value system that has to come from ethical decision-making, firstly. Because if we're just thinking about what boxes we can tick, whether it's for regulation or for certification, we're never going to be looking at the holistic issues and connecting that gap between the problem and the solution. So from ethical decision-making, business as an agent of change, business for good, we can then use design thinking to reduce carbon footprint, to reduce all the other negative impact, and decelerate resource use, but scale up resource efficiency. So in our business, 18 years later, we are able to really prove that sustainability through efficiency can equate directly to profitability and growth, but growth not at negative impact, the cost of negative impact. So business as an agent for good, this month is B Corp month, and this evening we have an event celebrating B Corp month and International Women's Day. Really, it is to optimize and to really advocate for the movement of standards adaptation has to be integrated into business practice. But firstly, business has to do good. And what does good mean is what we also need to redefine. But we need stakeholders in engagement, which is why every single chapter and section, stakeholders in this book are who we need to be collaborating with in order to partner and change make. So this is the 360 sustainability compass to which Deploy navigates, make decisions, and it's our purpose, is also our methodology. So our mission, methodology, merchandise, and marketing are all the same sides of one sphere, different sides of the same sphere. And it starts from carbon neutral, but that was a certification that we certified 15 years ago. But people think certification means that you're green. We think certification is only the starting point. That is 0 degrees. Until we start doing all the rest of it, we're not even anywhere near, being sustainable. And actually, climate has already changed. It's a moving target.
there is no end game. There is also no quick win. We can't just cherry pick to say, oh, well, we'll do a bit of recycling and we'll do a bit of organic sourcing. So really, before we start designing, we actually research and listen to people in as much as what they do want as what they don't want. What they don't want, don't produce it. Then it's actually better sell through for us. It's better for the environment. It's great for everyone. I won't go through all the details. This book, which you should already have now, if not, please order, will tell you the details. So really, let's design a new sustainable system for radical transformation, because we're out of time and we have to work together. And thank you for working together with us on this book.
So we've got just time for maybe one or two questions to try and keep roughly on track. So do we have any specific questions? And if you do want to ask a question, please can you state your sort of name and organisation. So do we have any burning questions for Bernice? We got one and two, and then I think that's unfortunately what we're going to have to take for the moment. So maybe we go here first. This is closest, and then here. And Bernice is on LinkedIn, so yeah.
Hi Bernice, that was great, thank you. My name's David Lee. I've got my own venture called XYZ Exchange, which is trying to help independents or MSMEs thrive through sustainability. Looking at the intersection between kind of zero waste and lowering working capital requirements.
Just one rule today.
Short to the point. Okay. Sorry.
So what's the question?
And I'm also at UAL. The question is what are your thoughts on, and I only heard something about this, I don't know enough, but from what I understand, in terms of like neoclassical economics, which is a lot of what the modern economy is built on, and there's a lot of good thinking in it as far as I can tell, it's one of the issues is how it treats energy within it. And it's not, maybe it needs a tweak. Have you got any thoughts on that side of things? I don't know if you've ever looked at that.
Yes, so obviously we can't do anything without energy, and I think COPs are all focused on energy, which is the starting point of everything. However, I think the economic system is broken, and so doesn't matter whether energy comes from renewable or traditional sources, what is it propelling and how is the machine working is the question. And that's what I'm trying to break down the system to demonstrate that actually in every single sector, we need to be looking at the machine and how, whether it's steam coming in or wind energy coming in or petrol, actually what is it being used for? The financial system is the other thing which really needs reforming. And even all of this green investment and impact investment, etc., actually is barely scratching the surface, because if you look at institutional investors, which a lot of this economic system, the neoclassical economic system, is all based on investment in shareholders' values. And those investments are still not really filtering down to actually hold all the different tiers of chain accountable. So pension funds, let's say, most of pension funds invest in buildings of some description, swathes of them, housing, whatever. None of them are mandating buildings to be energy efficient, to be using renewable sources of material. Building is one of the top 5 most wasteful and polluting industries in the world as well. So what are these green investments actually mandating? What are they actually investigating and valuing to do green? So I think that's where the economic system really needs reforming, which is why I don't want to call it capitalism because it becomes very political. I just call it consumerism because, communist systems also want consumerism.
Excellent. Sorry, we've got a tight time scale here, so I think we've got one more question here. If you still want to ask your question.
Yeah. Just
and maybe use the thing for the
unsustainable speaking microphone. Rory Greenan, architect working in aviation, which I think we beat you in terms of unsustainability. Just in terms of the greenwashing, the complexity of measuring it. The word itself, sustainable, how you unpack that, would it not be better to show unsustainability to simplify it because nobody uses that word because they don't want to admit they're unsustainable. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think there is definitely a lot of terminologies that need to be defined and redefined, because all these buzzwords have become so ubiquitous that they almost mean nothing. So yes, I can't agree more. And in fact, the wicked problem, if you read the chapter, is all trying to demonstrate the unsustainability of what we think we're doing right. So yeah.
Excellent. Sorry, I have to be quite tough on questions because we've got a time scale, and we'll now pass across to Sandy, and then we'll pick up the other broader questions after the other presenters.
Hello. I'll just move on the slides. Hi, I'm delighted to be here celebrating the launch of this book and to meet in person some of the contributors as well. So I'm Sandy Black, and I'm Professor of Fashion and Textile Design and Technology at Centre for Sustainable Fashion at London College of Fashion UAL, just for the full works there. And I formerly ran a fashion knitwear business, selling ready-to-wear knitwear and knitting kits internationally for about 15 years. And my research interests in recent years have reflected this and focused very much on the roles of purpose-led businesses, micro and small-sized enterprises, because the fashion sector, this is how they operate at the design-led end. So those are people who are doing fashion differently. I hope you can hear me now. And as Bernice has just and Martin have just outlined, we're very familiar now with so many issues that have to be dealt with, and the fashion and textile industry contributes very significantly to these negative issues. So we're hoping that the book starts to look at solutions. So I'm going to talk about a project that we did with a number of pioneering design-led fashion businesses, researching their sustainability values and creative practices and business models. And I'm working with colleagues from Middlesex University, some of whom are here, and Open University. And this was it happened during and before and during the pandemic, so that was interesting in itself. But I've always felt that these micro and small businesses have functioned as the R&D for the wider fashion industry for many years, but they often struggle to survive. And the project recognised these enterprises, and we're looking into the way that they can transform and drive the transformation of the fashion system. And we worked then with about 50 businesses, and then much more in-depth with 27, which ranged from traditional womenswear, menswear, through to service-based industries. And we had one medium-sized business. That just shows you the profile. And so these are the themes. We were looking, as I said, at values, capabilities, processes, networks, and ecosystem, practices and roles, and the business models that fostered sustainable practices. And I'll show you a few examples now of some of those businesses and the emerging themes. And it was interesting, as I said, we were working during the pandemic, and it really showed some of their agility and resilience, that some of these businesses are capable of reacting very quickly. Oops, there we are. So looking at fashion as a tool for social change, two London-based businesses here, Bethany Williams and Birdsong, both were set up as socially engaged enterprises, providing work and training for local groups of women often from more disadvantaged communities. And they also worked with charities, both in the UK and overseas. And both have won significant awards for their work. And Birdsong obtained B Corp certification last year. And this is quite a significant thing for many businesses to do. a key company, Elvis and Cressy, were founded in way back in 2005 as a social enterprise, and they were one of the first to get this B Corp certification of fashion-related businesses in the UK, and they were found in order to rescue materials that were going to go to landfill, particularly decommissioned fire hoses from the London Fire Brigade, which sounds bizarre, but this is what the foundation of their business. They also work with reclaimed leather scraps from Burberry and many other reclaimed material. They don't use virgin resources. And they have remarkably, in recent years, at the end of 2020, they relocated their business to a farm and set up their own self-sufficient water system and waste treatment water system, planted vineyards, look at conservation grazing, and all with whilst operating the business. And they're becoming a hub for regenerative agriculture and business for many other businesses. So in terms of, consumer engagement, as I was saying, a lot of these businesses are very agile. They were already working online when the pandemic hit, and so were able to really always establish very good relationships with their customers. And Rayburn is well known for upcycling ex-military fabrics and garments, and you can see starting with these parachutes, and he's just celebrated 15 years in business. But one of the things that they've always done is engage their customers and have opened up their studios, and they run workshops and so on, and went online and delivered talks and sent people kits to make at home with their offcut animals, which you can see Christopher Rayburn on the left there. And this transitioned very well to the online circumstances for the pandemic. Here, an example, Phoebe English, who is a designer who's herself created and developed some networks to help people use resources in the designer fashion sector and reuse and share waste and surplus. And this Nothing New collection uses only dead stock and repurposed fabrics from things like the hospitality sector and so on. And she was also instrumental in setting up, during the pandemic, the emergency designer network with London-based designers and working with factories to produce scrubs for the NHS when the government was struggling to do so. So that agility was there, very much demonstrated. Another business with a business model of just making one product, a jacket, which they develop in different fabrics and different materials, with limited edition batch production of about 300, and they're all pre-sold before they're made in an ethical factory in Portugal, and they're the two co-founders there. And so this is a successful business model for this company. Petit Pli is an example of innovation within children's wear. The founder, Ryan, was trained in aeronautical engineering, but wanted to solve the problem of the children's clothing that obviously they grow out of really quickly. So these pleated garments can last up to over 7 sizes and grow with the child. And again, that's been quite successful. Looking now at some of the uses of the digital technology and apps, this company New, they started very small in Dublin with hyper-local networks within universities, just like friends sharing clothes amongst themselves. And this has developed now into a much bigger sharing and swapping platform, and these types of businesses have proliferated. And this, of course, is about maintaining and extending and prolonging the life of garments that have already exist. So it's new to you rather than new to the planet. Another example is Save Your Wardrobe, which is helping people make the most of their existing wardrobe and integrating any new products and linking very much to services like dry cleaners and so on. And they've received an Innovation Award from LVMH and are attracting funding, and that has a business that's growing. A very key digital company is Unmade, who really want to shake up the fashion industry, and they're changing the paradigm from design, make, sell to design, sell, make. Working with large companies, they've developed a software that creates a digital end-to-end system, so that they started off with knitwear where a client, an individual customer can customize a design and can actually develop that can just be made for them, made specifically for them. They're also working with bigger companies such as New Balance, Rafa Sportswear, with printed textiles in order to customize and make on demand in small batches. So that's they've developed extremely well. So these are examples of ways of doing business differently and trying to really shake up the industry. I just wanted to then quickly look at 3 other case studies I contributed to the book. Martin mentioned Mud Jeans earlier on, based in the Netherlands, founded by Bert van Son in 2012, with circularity at the heart of the business. And they pioneered the idea of leasing jeans so that jeans could be bought or leased and then sent back. They take them back from their own and others, and also create new fabric from the old denim. And at the moment they're creating about 40% of recycled denim cotton in their new jeans, and they're aiming eventually to get to 100% if they possibly can. And just all their decisions, such as printing labels rather than sewing another patch on, those are all the detail that they actually pay attention to. So you can read that case study. And Bernice has already mentioned her own business, which and talked about her 360-degree sustainability ethos. And obviously the business was set up to provide well-designed, high-quality, well-fitting, tailored clothing to women of all ages. And I'll just show you one of the multifunctional outfits that can be worn in different ways. And this, of course, helps to really reduce consumption, prolong the life of the clothing that's made. And also, I believe, take back and will alter and customize for customers after any number of years, really. And then the last case study I'll talk about is Deserto, which is co-founded by 2 people in Mexico. And this is a leather substitute which uses cactus fibre and bioresins in order to create this fabric. And they work both with the automotive industry and with the fashion industry. This was only launched in 2019, just pre-pandemic, and so is developing. At the moment, they're using about 30% cactus fibre, but they're hoping that can be increased. And so this is an example of a different way of approaching sustainability. And so but the trouble is, a lot of these micro and small businesses are not operating on a level playing field. It just isn't level for them against the massive conglomerate businesses. And so legislation is very important, and also getting breaks, tax breaks for people operating in more sustainable ways would be very important. And one of the key issues also is finance. And I know that we're going to hear from Fergus, my colleague Fergus Lyon from Middlesex Centre for Enterprise and Economic Development Research, about their chapter and their approach to looking at finance for small businesses. So I think, yes, I think I might just wrap up there and look forward to the discussions that we're going to have. And thank you, everybody, and thanks to the contributors. And my co-editor.
So, thanks, Sandy. We'll now pass across to Liz, and Oops, we're now into sort of short 5-minute presentations, and then we'll be opening up for discussion amongst the speakers.
Okay, let me just making sure. Can you hear me well? Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liz Suarez, and with two colleagues from Utrecht University, Claudia and Jesus, we wrote chapter 20, which is intitulated Circular Economy in the Textile and Apparel Sector, an overview of global trends, challenges and opportunities. We all know what like Martin and Bernice mentioned, you know, the apparel value chain is known for multiple social and environmental challenges, and circular economy has been used to tackle some of these challenges. We also know that circular economy gets operationalized through different circular strategies, and in the sector we have been able to identify 7. Redesign, which is really thinking about the product towards the end of life process. The reduce and the resource recovery strategy is about incorporating biomaterials and also components or ideas, as Sandy mentioned, of like produce on demand. We also have strategies like rental that really are more about extending the life of a product. And in here we have like fashion libraries that can be on-site or can be virtual. We also have resale, and then the resale we also have brick and mortar stores and also non-for-profit organizations and other organizations and all. We have repair that can happen, like in the case of Patagonia or of Nudie Jeans inside the company, but also like independent workshops. Remanufacture, really like to try to give a life to the product before you bring it out to recycling, which is really the last value option, but still a very used strategy in the sector. And all of these circular strategies have, we develop or were able to identify some global challenge, some global trends. So if you look at the middle of the graph, you will see that strategies like resale, rental and repair are growing a lot in the US and in Europe by doubling it amount of produce in the next couple of years, 2030. Also, we noticed that remanufacture and recycle is becoming more of an opportunity for countries in Africa, because they are now receptives of a lot of these textile waste that is coming from other countries. And we also noticed that in Latin America, bringing a little bit what Martin mentioned about Aboriginal knowledge, that there is an interesting offering of biomaterials that can be incorporated into the whole concept of circular economy. Then we also noticed that a trend is the multilateral collaborations, and in these multilateral collaborations we see processes or happening together with organizations such as PACE, which is like the Pact for Accelerating Circular Economy. And then what these multilateral collaborations are important is because the value chain is expanded in different geographies, and thus it's very important to be able to harmonize these different kinds of policies to try to bring an approach that is more concerted. And we have the GARES, and we have also in Africa and in Latin America some alliances of circular economy who have started after this. And then specifically on the sector, PAS has a specific textile sector section, and we also have initiatives like the Circular Fashion Partnership that is in Bangladesh with different companies in the value chain. And it's also important to mention that now there's also the possibility of working with cities and NGOs, and New York has a great example of initiatives that really try to move the needle forwards to circularity in that sense. Now, in terms of policies, as Martin mentioned, the European Union is really leading the way. We have the Green Deal, and under the Green Deal, there's the European Textile Strategy with more than 16 different pieces of regulation that really try to move both the environmental and the social component forward. And if you want to hear, really the focus is in the strategies such as like redesign, repair, and recycling. However, one of the biggest things that is missing is really how do we reduce consumption, which is the big elephant of the room. And there's also policies happening in other parts of the world, like in the US and Canada and Latin America, in terms of extended producer responsibility. But however, it's not really focusing on textiles itself. In terms of challenges, we can say that the biggest challenges is the lack of systemic cross-border enforceable regulations. There is problems between the lack of circular economy presence in trade instruments, so there's tariff and gate fees that really are creating problems between borders to be able to really upscale circularity. There's a lack of organized textile collection across the globe, and there's a big problem between how to make it a just transition that doesn't leave anyone behind. In terms of opportunities, there's the possibility to create good opportunities by creating cascades, so mixing strategies such as rental, repair, and resale, and creating value for businesses as well. As we know, repair, remanufacture, and recycling are highly labor-intensive sectors, and thus they could create good employment possibilities if two things happen: reskilling and better working conditions. Otherwise, we will be repeating the same problem of the linear power value change as well. So in terms of textile the textile sector is very complex and it spans over different countries with different levels of development and regulations. It can bring a lot of opportunity, circular economy to the sector, but we need to be very aware of the asymmetries and the power dynamics that exist in the sector to make sure that we really move things forward and then to avoid repeating the same problems that we have today. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have time to pick up on questions later on, but we've got Fergus. Over to Fergus.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Fergus Lyon, Professor at Middlesex University. Been working with Sandy and others on a project looking at sustainable fashion entrepreneurship. And our chapter in the book is particularly around the idea of finance, of how do you actually get the resources in to help increase the reach of sustainable fashion. We've heard some amazing examples of the inspiring businesses we're working with, but the challenge is how can they increase that positive impact? How can they do it in a way that is staying true to their values and their ambitions as well? And the other challenge is how do you actually take a market share from the business as usual if we've got these great innovations going on? And this is part of a wider area of interest of this idea of flourishing enterprise. How do you actually have enterprise that actually leads to what we call sustainable prosperity, about living well, but living within our limits as well. So we actually developed this idea looking at what we call the finance escalator. It's very oversimplified here, but actually showing how businesses can move over time in the early stage to have different types of different finance. So it starts with the friends, family, maybe other suppliers as well, but also people getting grants at the early stage. So most of the examples of the businesses were relying on that. Some of them were then also looking at getting external finance, and we focused on that in our book chapter. Not a relatively small number, but they're getting various seed venture capital, getting business angels, which are individuals investing in the money, the Dragon's Den type approach, and also looking at crowdfunding as well. And then looking at as you scale up, going up to other funds from private banks, from private equity, from banks and others, as the businesses move up. But the businesses we looked at weren't sort of going quite that far yet, or only one of them. So looking at what are the sort of the challenges and some of the issues and the findings from our work, one of the key things is how do you actually get that finance to this early stage? These businesses were trying to persuade other people to invest their money in. They've had to have the information, and there's often a lack of information. We call it the information asymmetry, that the investors don't have the information about the business, and the business doesn't have information about the investor. And it's about how do you actually get that, particularly when there's no track record. And traditionally, this is mainly looking at commercial issues, but when we're looking at sustainable fashion, it's much more than that. It's not just the commerce, it's the values of sustainability, the values of the working conditions. How do you actually get the information to share that as well? So there's a problem there from the investors getting that information. There's also an issue we found of the businesses themselves. How do they get investment ready? How do they make themselves ready to take on, to attract this investment as well? And with sustainability, we found it even more important, some of these sort of disparities between the investors and the business, because we're looking at much longer term investment, maybe than usual, not looking for a quick profit. These are longer term investments. And also for sustainability, it's about, it's not just about the carbon, it's about the biodiversity impacts, it's about the working conditions, it's about this a whole range of information required as well. And there's also the issue we found was the process of how do you select the investors. When you've got these values-based organisations, they've got to find investors who share the same values. And where there isn't that shared values, that's where real problems come, as investors come in, start demanding issues that go against the values of the organisation. And I think that's the challenge and the key capability that we see in these successful businesses, is how do you balance running a really good business while being true to your values as well? And how do you actually work with those investors who might be looking for growth, who are looking for return, but they're also looking for exit as well? So that whole process, how does that fit in to a sustainable fashion business? And so we found the importance of being very cautious on taking finance, but actually quite exciting relationships built up as there's an increased numbers that we heard earlier of these impact investors wanting to explore and invest sustainably. Thank you.
More opportunities to pose some questions to Fergus later on, and then we now have Cara.
Hi everyone, and thank you to the editors for inviting me to be here today and contribute. I'm pleased to introduce Chapter 17, Crafting Connections with Clothing, Values, Influence and Relationships. And in this chapter we note how the distance between where the world's largest brands are based and where their clothes are sourced and made disconnects customers from the skills, material and labour involved in the process and devalues it. So here we explore ways that forward-thinking brands will involve customers in the process, restoring value through creative empowerment and collaborative relationships. When customers have no idea where, how, or by whom a piece of clothing is made, it's difficult for them to understand just what it takes to get it into their hands. The considerable value within it is reduced to simply how it looks, how it feels, and what it costs. Water, energy, and chemical use, and the livelihoods and working conditions of those who produced it are all out of sight. And over time, our perception of value has shifted from craft to cost. Fashion used to have 2 seasons a year, with inspiration trickling down into local skills and creative economies. But with industrialisation and the arrival of fast fashion in the 1980s and 90s, 2 seasons became 4, then 8, and now 52 a year. We're only meeting demand, say so many fast fashion brands. But are they only meeting demand, or are they creating it and maintaining it to fuel consumption, and locking customers into that practice to do so? Social practice theory argues that what we choose to do as individuals is not always based on what we want to do, but what we are influenced to do by the social structures in place around us. We use it to ask, when it comes to clothing, do people have access to the materials and equipment they need to make or maintain a piece of clothing by themselves? Do people have the knowledge and skills they need to make or maintain a piece of clothing by themselves? And do people have time and space to cultivate a sense of value and appreciation for what's involved in clothing design and production? We can use social practice theory to examine how much or little agency people have over their fashion decisions, and therefore whether they are passive consumers or active participants in the process. Currently, brands control the material choices based on their own objectives, like saving time and money and increasing sales. Production is hidden in complex supply chains. The product is supplied ready to wear, so no customer skill is needed. The brands decide what's on trend and when, and supply ready-made meaning and personal expression on a mass scale. As such, the customer's role is merely to be passive consumers at the end point, the point of sale. Addressing a social practice requires weakening or breaking the brand's links between elements to allow space for customers to reconnect. Customers are already doing this by themselves, renting, buying from second-hand shops and smaller brands, upskilling online and in repair cafes, but they expect brands to meet their efforts. By using renewable materials, for example, and improving durability and repairability. Facilitating their skills to keep clothes for longer, to customise, maintain, repair and connect to local services. And encouraging them to cultivate their own sense of value and identity, to be creative, reducing the social pressure of trends. And in this way, brands share access to the three elements, and customers are active participants in the process. Craft is one participation method that thoughtful brands are incorporating. Participation in craft builds overall appreciation for things and how they might be made, and creates time for customers to reconnect, elevating meaning and value. We all know Toast's free repair service, for example, which engages specialist experts to share knowledge and skills with its customers, including traditional techniques like sashiko repair. Social media acts as a bridge for brands and customers, creating a design space where people learn new skills, develop new practices, and connect to craftspeople. The opportunity is not so much to market, but to connect with them by inviting them into design decisions, teaching making, mending, and caring skills, and establishing dialogue on evolving brand meaning. Here, a case study of 5 small lingerie brands looks at how social media can support the transition from passive consumers to active participants. A study of 926 images, videos, and stories from their Instagram accounts revealed that they invited their customers into the design process, using Instagram stories to engage them in fabric and colour selections. They also shared behind-the-scenes production videos offering transparency and information on bra manufacturing. These actions educated customers on the materials, processes, and skills necessary to produce sustainable bras, cultivating value and meaning. Overall, we highlighted that the disconnection between people and clothing production has made fashion unsustainable and counteracts the wider sustainable development agenda, and that the most innovative brands enable reconnection to long-term sustainable behaviours through circular, post-growth, collaborative enterprise models that reduce production and consumption and restore quality, craft and creativity to everyday life and work, supporting the necessary system shift within fashion and contributing to more sustainable futures for us all. Thank you.
Thanks, Cara, and more opportunities in a short while for questions, and over to you.
Very quick. Our chapter is chapter 21. A couple of years ago, I and Martin started looking into what's going on in the world, how we change the world, the more sustainability. We look into a couple sectors from the building, city to energy and fashion mobility system. So that's one of our thinking process to look into how we change the world differently, especially on textile and the fashion industry. So we both are author of this book. So we look into the whole big mega trend. We found that there's a key driver for all of the sector, including textile and fashion, is technology acceleration. Very fast in the past couple of years, will be even more under the AI era. So we look into, in books, we look into, there's quite 3 major things happen in the textile industries. One is the smart textile. Start have all of the device into the fashion and also in the fabrics. And then digital fashion is one of the other things. People look into virtual world rather than only just the real world. And then other things we found very, very important is how actually we use the blockchain or other technology to help the whole value chain and supply chain to tackle with transparency and the traceability issue. So because there's a lot of things going on, we just very quick going on to over case studies, one of the smart masks, especially over the COVID period. And then we know if you start to embedding all of technology into the textile, there's the end-of-life issues you need to tackle with, which is you become the e-waste rather than just textile. And then we'll also have some of the technology to use the technology to fit your suit much better, so you create the things the people actually need. So there's various technology and the companies is looking to this space. And that's why we talk about transparency and traceability. A lot of the new, including Microsoft, all of the different big, the blockchain technology start to look into textile, the traceability issue, which is very, very big. Then we look at, I really in this chapter, we look into what kind of the material we can use. We already discussed of a lot of the is petrol-based, especially like 50 to 60% still plastic, basically polyester. But there's a lot of commercial-ready type of textile already exists. For example, Pitex, who used banana waste to create the vegan leather. Martin will show you some of the material already start to work on this. And then we look into ball thread from California to look into use the mushroom structure to make the same type of the vegan leather as well. And then you can use as clothes. This Dutch designer already start to look into fabric. And then that's already been mentioned by early on. And then we're looking actually in Asia or Africa, a lot of the traditional already use a lot of different textile from the vegetable, including lotus, make beautiful silk. And then the microalgae also can be used as a yarn because it's one of the fastest growing vegetable in the world, and then how you use smart fiber to actually create your textile. And those are one of the examples. You also look into the technology actually who can take the recycled technology from the beginning to actually create exactly the same yarn as the second life or third life. So this is existing for 20, 30 years already. Now we're looking to the mega trend, like how designer and brand can work together with we call the era of C, collaboration, cooperation, and co-creation. So you look at some of the example is the family famous McCarthy daughters who is used her store and her fashion drive to actually bring all the innovator from around the world into her store and her fashion, her brand. So including like the mushroom fiber, you use your brand to actually change. We will also look into how the deep science work with high designer, which is the U.S. the launch this with UN together. They use the circularity, equality, and the regenerative technology to actually bring the scientific world work with designer. So, for example, we talk about the mushroom root. Now we also can see there's certain structure like a building. The MIT architecture already start to use 3D print those kind of material into the structure of the building. So that's the same kind of technology and material actually already commercial ready. You can use as exchange, replace leathers as well as the textile. So we also look at the whole collaborative consumption model, which now a lot of the initiatives already exist in the US, UK, and the rest of the world to look into how you can share your wardrobe renting model, all the different type of the initiate and the companies start to look into how we can share our fashion together. And also in the end, we look into what's the designer will looks like what kind of equipment they need to be able to let them become the future-ready fashion. And that's we look into what's the skill set they need to build up as designer become to the more sustainable fashion designer. So let's just quick.
We're almost coming to questions. We've got a couple more presentations. So we've got Samantha.
Hello everyone, my name is Samantha Corcoran and I'm from the National College of Art and Design, Dublin, Ireland, with Christine Beza and Elizabeth S. Quinn of Drexel University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We wrote about the challenges, opportunities and approaches to increasing sustainability content in fashion and textiles, education and curriculum. Across the world, design educators are exploring what it means to teach in a time of flux and hybridity. How do we transition students into an existing industry while arming them for systemic change? How do we increase sustainable practice while preserving the art form and craft inherent in good design? Spanning research and coursework both in Ireland and America, we explore the exchange of ideas and intersections linking material and craft, the natural world, and social responsibility to collaboratively address how higher education develops the next generation of industry professionals through holistic and connected design, thinking, and making. In NCAD, a team of educators devised a series of collaborative design school projects exploring innovative material making and biophilic-inspired design. Multidisciplinary teams of students were set a range of experiential, reflective material-making challenges connected to the origin of materials of the earth, land, and environment. In 2017, responding to ocean pollution, students sourced industrial waste and prototyped innovative material approaches towards resource second life. The power of materials as experience, emotional human connection to both material and the natural world, empathetic and expanded design thinking helped solve complex problems from different perspectives. In 2018, staff asked, "Can plants save the world?" We looked at abundant local natural waste and nutritive future materials to shape, protect, and future-proof. We explored regenerative design as a circular holistic system of materials and textiles, nurturing and nourishing to people and place. In 2020, we took an earth approach to treasure land, animals, biodiversity, and local resources. We explored hybrid innovation, traditional and contemporary technique, nose-to-tail usage, and natural finish, prototyping with Irish waste wool, peat, and bioplastics moved Irish craft, farming, and ecology towards a new material heritage. NCAD key insights include respect and value our connection to nature, individual skill sets, and each other to drive creative design solutions. Knowledge share can be enabled and supported, and evaluate circular systems of design for a more holistic and protective future system. In 2019 and 2020, Elizabeth Quinn of Drexel also introduced experimental educational approaches in their sustainable fashion collection design, exploring circularity as foundation of their craft, responsible design principles, zero waste, upcycling and deconstruction in relation to both materiality and fashion techniques. In 2021, Drexel continued this approach with the project Experimental Accessories, Biomaterials and the Impermanence of Fashion. Circularity and biodegradability were explored through material innovation, with emphasis on material end of life, using bio-based components and naturally regenerative resources. Drexel key insights include thoughtful designs should communicate purpose and intent, moments of reflection reduce unnecessary and/or overproduction, and strategic planning of curriculum is a must to centre responsible design practice. In Design, Disaster and Impact 2020, Chris Beza of Drexel took a transdisciplinary approach to integrating ethics and social entrepreneurship into the course, using tools and frameworks to disrupt design thinking to help students contemplate concepts for radical change and innovation. Design fiction, science fiction films, and literature were used to imagine potential future ethical dilemmas students may encounter, and the adapted ethics canvas for design evaluation helped the students analyse and critically evaluate and improve their ideas. Within this chapter, NCAD Dublin, Ireland and Drexel University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA offer collaborative key insights and future course applications with key directed advice for universities, educators, lecturers, designers, technical experts, merchandisers to help accelerate sustainability and creativity in a real way. Gleaning cultural and craft knowledge from material masters, skilled practitioners and cross-disciplinary collaborators while looking at the wider contemporary world and environmental challenges will bring opportunities to link ideas and form potential new partnerships directed towards positive learning, research, and ultimately real-world change. Thank you.
Thanks very much. You can see how these things are weaved together, and I'm deliberately mixing metaphors here. So we've got into the last couple of presentations. We've got Elizabeth here, and then we have one further video, and then we'll go into some discussion.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Bigger, alongside Helga Aron Wells and Hannah C. Krebel. We wrote chapter 31 entitled Fashion Ex Machina, Human-Machine Collaboration to Support Sustainability through Customized Design and Production. In our chapter, we outline challenges for transitioning to bespoke production and present practical solutions to solve production transitions for sustainability. Two processes, generative garment design for sustainability and adaptive pattern design, are presented with iterative workflows for increasing production agility. This chapter further discusses human-machine collaboration, increasing value over volume, and systemic thinking for fashion production methodologies. The workflows discussed focus on the processes needed for transitioning to sustainable bespoke fashion production for Industry 5.0. Industry 5.0 places worker well-being at the center of production processes and uses new technologies to provide prosperity beyond jobs and growth while respecting planetary production limits. This differs from Industry 4.0, which describes organizing production processes based on technology and devices autonomously communicating with each other along the value chain. Agile production systems involving human and machine collaborations throughout the manufacturing processes are able to adapt as necessary, creating smoother transitions for environmental and economic sustainability. Emerging production processes using Web3 technologies are challenging the competitive standards, workforce, and consumer expectations. Small and medium-sized enterprises are using new processes to engage consumers, exploiting niche categories for increased visibility and virtual consumer collaborations. Some of these systems, like blockchain and using the interplanetary file system, create larger movements to accelerate these transitions. Generative garment design for sustainability can also help users navigate more complex parameters, such as sustainability impacts of different design choices. Consumer personalization and sustainability goals evaluated using systems, including multi-objective optimization algorithms, can facilitate design compromises. For example, goals for decreasing effluent and microfiber release of a garment change requirements for textile finishing, dyes, and fiber types. This could lead to garment design fit and fashion compromises. Managing multiple sustainability goals in design is possible with human-machine collaboration, exploiting the machine's ability to calculate and manage the data, and the human strength in deciphering the societal needs of the design. And for the digital folks, I'm talking about generative evolutionary algorithms, not regular generative algorithms that produce batch results. So as production paradigms are shifting towards customization, on-demand and bespoke fashion pipelines to address sustainability goals, we add in customization and collaboration with consumer changes to the fashion production models in a twofold manner. First, changing cultural relationships the consumer has with products, bringing consumers closer to design and manufacture of the items. And second, changing from bulk production of products that may not be sold and create waste to on-demand production of products that have been already purchased. This adaptive pattern design workflow shows the processes within an iterative on-demand production pipeline system. And finally, fragmented global supply chains need a lingua franca, or a common language for interoperability of sustainable production. Interoperability, or computational systems' ability to share information between systems, is an opportunity for improved digital to physical garment pipelines. Addressing specific community needs in each region can build towards sustainable bespoke local production. These emerging processes, generative analysis, and pattern adaptations support workflows for localism that can be completed with a laptop and a home sewing machine. The rise of fashioning with machines is proceeding, but it is up to humans to choose the desired relationships with emerging machines. With critical thinking, ethical processes, and design analysis, much can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And finally, we have a presentation from Trevor Davis, who is sunning himself in a beach in the Caribbean. So he's coming to us via, hopefully, a video here. Now, does the technology...
Hello, I'm Trevor Davis, and this is Risky Business. Together with Lucy Dunn and Elizabeth Bigger, I contributed a chapter to the book, and I'm going to give you a 5-minute overview of it today. Now, for those of you just using audio, I'm a white man in his 60s. Now, our chapter is all about the risks and some opportunities, of course, associated with a family of technologies called Industry 4.0. If you look at the slide, you'll see some examples here. Now, Industry 4.0 technologies are developing at pace. They have a profound impact on the ability of fashion brands to improve their production processes, and they also have a significant potential for reducing the environmental impact, not just of production processes, but the entire life cycle. They also have the potential to dampen down demand. They can help with a move towards a more circular economy. But this all requires a significant change in the way that the big brands think about the fashion industry and the way that consumers behave, all of which is quite challenging. So why call the chapter Risky Business? Well, the pace of change of these technologies is very fast. If you think of generative artificial intelligence like ChatGPT, then that's really appeared from nowhere in a couple of years, and yet is having a very significant effect all over not just the creative industries, but other industries as well. Of course, when you get new technology, it does bring a degree of uncertainty with it, and you need a way of managing that risk. So what we've done is we've looked at some work that NASA did quite a while ago on the space program to manage technology risk, and we've adapted that for the fashion industry. And you can see the framework on the screen here. For the book chapter, what we did was we looked at the entire life cycle from creation through to post-consumer and looked at where all of these different technologies were being applied. And what we noticed very clearly is that there are a number of quite important gaps. So we all know that if you put a lot of thought into design, then that will generally have a beneficial effect in terms of sustainability right across the life cycle. But what you can see from our table is that most of the effort at the moment with these technologies is going into accelerating and improving production. So that's possibly a good thing, but it may actually be making the sustainability situation worse in a couple of areas. So looking to the future, what we would hope to see is people using the concept of technology risk to think about how they move these technologies from the downstream processes to the more upstream processes like design. And in that way, then I think we have a better chance of improving the sustainability of fashion. On the other hand, we also need to use these tools to communicate with consumers and try and reduce the number of styles that are being produced, to try and reduce the number of new garments that are actually being produced. In other words, we need to calm down the demand side as well. So that's all I'm going to say for now. You can read the rest in the chapter in the book, which is chapter 29, and thank you very much for your attention.
Let's show our appreciation for all the speakers, including our virtual speaker. So can all the speakers come up to the front? And an interesting question for me, who is going to take the throne? Maybe we... Oh. Maybe you can take it here. So, again, sort of... Oh, maybe I'll pass the... So I'll introduce it from here. So, again, we've got about 15 minutes for questions. The rules are introduce yourself and short, succinct questions, no speeches. Because or else we will never get out, we'll never get into networking, etc., etc. We'll never come back to the round table. So, who wants to kick off? Jay, you had your hand up earlier on. Is that question relevant?
Probably not now, but I do have another question. Sorry.
Go for it.
Jay, I'm PhD research at UCA and also co-founder of Lomas. Thank you. I just wanted your thoughts on the term innovation and whether we misuse it or we misunderstand it within a fashion context. I think it's often associated with technology and creating brand new things, not necessarily maybe applying more a different perspective on something that's already done. And sometimes I think it can go against small businesses, especially within the craft, especially with investment, etc. You know, maybe something's not as innovative, so they kind of don't want to really look at it. So I just kind of wanted your thoughts, really, whomever, on the use of innovation when it comes to sustainability.
I can quick answer the question because our company is called Sustainable Innovation Lab. So we try to combine experiment and innovation and sustainability together. So my quick response of the innovation is some of the people who think the great idea, this is the idea, but you need to have the system changing to the positive way, then you can call innovation. And if you want to combine sustainability with innovation, you have to have the system integration into the new idea, into actually system way to create the new value. That's what quick answer.
I'll just add on to that. I agree. The concept of social innovation is quite important in here as well. It's about how do we organise things differently? And I think if you're looking at the craft element in fashion, it's we need to organise differently to reach that, and that is a crucial part of innovation as well. And that's where I think your question around investors particularly, they're obviously looking for a return on their investment, but if that return includes a social or sustainable angle, and that comes into the innovation, then the impact investors would be looking for that.
but they are still a minority.
I would just like to say in relation to that question as well that I think craft is really important, and the value of craft and heritage and actually knowing your discipline will allow you innovate. And I think we've got to appreciate that.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me? Is this on? Yeah, I mean, I would just think I'd point out that we expect in the fashion sector, we expect innovation at every level of education, from, undergraduate right the way through. And I don't think that's true in lots of other sectors. I studied maths, and that wasn't expected at my undergraduate level. So I think we have high expectations for what you might call originality or innovation within this sector. I just felt that that's important to, and I think it can be expressed in so many different ways, and that's how we keep on creating this demand for novelty, this expectation for novelty, but doing old things in new ways, is also could be innovation. It's not all about, I don't think it's all about technology at all.
Just to quickly add one thing, I focus quite a lot on language, so just to pick up on the words that we use. So many words are used in so many different ways because we have so much influences from so many places that we actually use the words without agreeing on definitions, and it can be quite good practice sometimes to use the word and back it up with the definition as we understand it, to see that we have a common language and try and build that practice together. And just to iterate Sandy's point, the past, present and future all inform each other and are informed by each other, so innovation, in my opinion and my experience, is not just technology focused and future focused, it's informed by all sorts of interesting things.
I think just a quick one before somebody's next hand goes up is, particularly in this sector, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. It's not just about ideas, and it's tough in this area, very difficult to be absolutely sustainable. Being relatively sustainable given present knowledge and technology is still even a challenge. So, it's again one at the back and one at the front.
I wanted to ask, in the context of the European Sustainability Due Diligence Directive possibly being diluted or voted down this week, what is the likelihood that some of the sustainable business models that you've shared are going to be able to compete against some of the bigger established fashion brands? And if it does get voted down, what is the way forward?
Yeah, I think that... Can you hear me? But I think that, it's the problem with I think that the social corporate sustainability directive really was a landmark regulation to really change and make a move from being a voluntary to really focus into making mandatory laws, and it's pretty sad to see like that it is blocked now, but that I think that it was the big challenge that I see, is that there is not, it was addressing mainly big businesses and not necessarily small businesses, and we know that the fashion industry, there's a lot of small businesses, small and medium enterprises, and I think that there is still a way forward in terms of trying to create some sort of anticipatory due diligence, meaning trying to prepare for it. I do hope that there was a lot of work put into this directive, and I think that right now what we're facing is just it's a blockage, but I don't think this is going to be a permanent thing. I do believe that there are ways forward to make it happen. So I do believe that this is really the way forward. The decade for voluntary agreements is far due. We really need to move into more regulatory mechanisms that are mandatory. So
Yeah, I think that's really what we need to focus into, that it really happens. If I quickly respond to this question, I will reframe the question, because from my perspective, I don't think that the biggest challenge is from the big brand or sustainability. I will see is actually economic power shift. Because you look at to the current, the new coming cheap brand like Shein from China into occupy the world, that is the biggest challenge for me. Because some of the big brands from H&M, Zara or Nike, for example, they do have bring all of those sustainabilities on board for many years, work on a big appraisal correlation, Haggis index, whatever you believe or not. They do start to have that, but more and more I see is actually economic power shift to India and China manufacture power in that part of the world. How you can bring those world on board to actually tackle this issue is more alarming than the big brand in the Western world. That's my quick response to, because for example, we worked with Nike a couple of years ago. They tried to bring up the circularity into their brand. They already can achieve 6 circle cycle through their supply chain, value chain. They do push on. But if you don't care, or whatever cheapest you can buy $1 in the store, and that is where's the problem.
I think going on to the issue of power, it's also power in the supply chain, and there are a lot of small businesses in the supply chain, even of the bigger companies, and they're often left out of the conversation on the reporting, and particularly we're looking at the difference between natural fibres and man-made fibres. It might be easier for man-made fibres to do reporting, and actually doing the reporting on organic cotton and going to many small farmers is going to be a real challenge. They could be excluded. There's a risk there that we need to consider.
So just a quick comment from me. I think it's more and more pressure from external stakeholders, and I think it's thinking more broadly about reporting, not just sort of institutional reporting. It's coming up with better and clearer information. And one of the things that struck me from doing two of the chapters, there are original case studies working with companies in the supply chain, is just the level of misinformation and essentially lying that goes on in the supply chain. It's a huge issue from both the retail side through the system. So there's getting, let's say, more purity of information, if you want to. It is a real need, but I think there is more pressure emerging from different stakeholders to drive that. There was another question here, and if we'll take one other further question after that before networking.
Hiya. I think you can hear me, yeah. So if we're talking about speed and scale in regards to production, consumption, but also how there's a lot of leverage in changing the syllabus or in education, how do you think we could maybe implement the change of speed within the education system? Like, does that mean that education needs to be longer, maybe 10 years for students, so then they can learn systems more comprehensively or have more extensive and embodied, I guess, learning, and that would kind of influence the whole system at scale? Or do you think, yeah, how do you see education fitting in with the whole scale and changing of those aspects?
Well, let's start with that one. I mean, I think there's probably a multitude of different opportunities and approaches you could take within education. I definitely think there still needs to be that discipline-specific introduction in relation to whatever skills or whatever area you're looking at, because if you don't know that, then you cannot innovate or change or move forward. But throughout the basic degree, you need to really start introducing that idea of valuism and sustainability alongside what you're teaching, and maybe opportunities for change within that, moving into then, I think, more specific postgraduate and research-based approaches within education that really tackle key goals, I think.
Hi. Yeah, I'm not sure they need sort of hugely more time. It's not before the students can learn. Obviously, the educators themselves have to be educated in sustainable practices, because I think has been traditionally quite a lot of resistance to engaging with more difficult issues, and business as usual is just a lot easier. But I think there is a sea change happening, and you can see there's a lot more institutions. I mean, our Centre for Sustainable Fashion has three angles. You know, it has research, it has knowledge exchange, and it has education. And there are new initiatives all the time being set up in education. So it is happening, but I think a lot of this generation of educators, you know, have come from the traditional system. So there's quite an endemic shift that has to be made at all across different levels. But it is happening. I do believe it cannot be overlooked. You know, it's absolutely integral, because we won't get change without that happening through education, as well as industry voluntary initiatives.
Having come through the education system myself, through the creative industries and then into postgraduate in sustainable development practice, I would probably advocate for enterprise design to be part of the curriculum for the creative industries, so that they can explore the post-growth enterprise models that are actually quite aligned to their original values to begin with, being sort of channeled into business education beyond into the traditional business education. It sort of subverts their direction rather than reinforces and emphasises the values that already exist. Martin tapped into this earlier. He said Holland is 3 years ahead of us. They already have a post-growth masters for enterprise, not specifically for creative industries, but I think creative industries is where those values already exist to begin with and just need to be amplified and celebrated. So if there was a way to put that into the education system, I think there would be systems change as a result.
I do agree. So much has to happen in business education. I think that's been a missing. I think there's been more focus on design and environmentalism with design and materials and awareness there. But I think it's the business and education that it needs, enterprise and so on.
And I think maybe just to close off, I think it's also education within business, and I think that's large and small. And a lot of what practicing people in business lead is simple but not simplistic guidance. The challenge with a lot of the tools coming out of academia often are they're too complex for people who have got very short time scales to deliver things. So I think that's something okay, that's a very generic and simplistic statement, but I think the barriers to action are often complexity. And anyway, I'll leave that with our philosophical thought before networking. So maybe we can show our appreciation again to the speakers. Does anybody want to make any final comments? Does anybody have any final observations? For me, it feels like it continues to feel like a sector that is very complex, very fragmented. It's going to be facing over the next 4 or 5 years a lot of policy changes, a lot of standardization challenges. Are the graduates coming out of university prepared for that? Are the SMEs who are going to be hit by the legislation or have to tackle the legislation, do they have the right sorts of skills? Are they tapped into the standardization, the trade associations, the commission? And it comes back down to there's a sort of the sort of wicked problem, big issue that is at the heart of the sector type of system issues versus what's coming up and going to impact, people working in these companies, over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So it's seeing, that fact, 1% recycling of textiles or whatever it is pretty shocking, really, if you look at it in relatively. So I think, at least from my point of view, thank you very much for all the contributors to the book who are here today, all those that around the tables, around tables, and to all other delegates here today. I hope you found at least one new idea, one new thought, or one new thing that you might take some action on. And thank you all very much for coming. And we'll close now, unless anybody wants to bring anything else up, which quite a quick scan around the room suggests not. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.